So I'll just start this video by saying that if I contradict myself in language at any point, that's because I am trying to explain something that's impossible to explain in words. It's impossible to talk about because essentially it's completely paradoxical. It's not only impossible to talk about, it's impossible for the mind to think about. So if there are any contradictions in language, apologise, but it's probably inevitable. What I'm attempting to do is to point to something experientially using language. So what I'm saying isn't what I'm trying to convey. It's impossible to say what I'm trying to convey. I'm trying to point to something in experience. So with non-duality, we're not looking for a thing. We're not looking for anything. We're not trying to find something. The mind can't function here. The mind, the intellect can't grasp this. It's not possible. The mind has constructed over a long time deep layers of thought-based assumptions about the way reality is that are now taken for granted, that just seem to be real or are taken to be inherently real. So just like after the initial awakening, we realise that we are not our thoughts, we're not the narrative, we're not the collection of memories, thoughts, projections into the future, ideas, emotions, and identity that we once took ourselves to be. We become experientially clear that what we are at a fundamental level isn't this entity that lives in the head that's made of thoughts and stories and narratives and identity. So for anyone who is heavily identified with thought, none of this is going to make any sense whatsoever. It will sound like absolute nonsense. We need to be clear that what we are is, if we were to put a label on it, not thought. If we were to put a label on it, we could say what we are is awareness, consciousness, that which is aware of thought, that which is aware of experience, or that which is the subject that witnesses all phenomenon, something like that. It's something that we can't explain, but we know, and it's something that we can connect with, and it kind of has the sense of being quiet, being still, being just always there, being unchanging, and so on. So if we don't know that yet, this isn't going to make any sense at all. So, non-duality, we're not looking for something that's not there. So, like I was explaining with the initial awakening, usually we realise that we've been aware of this. It's been there the whole time. It's been obvious the whole time. We've just been ignoring it due to the stories in the mind, this fixation on identity, the identity that's made from thoughts. I'm going to use this, by the way, this extremely appropriate bowl thing. Here, I don't know what that says, but anyway, so non-duality is exactly like that. We're not looking for anything that's not there. After realising this, it's kind of like, it's the same as the initial perceptual shift. It's kind of like it's unbelievable that you've been staring at this constantly your whole life and just seemingly blatantly ignoring what's obviously there. And I can guarantee you that for anyone who's watching this video, it's you're looking at it all the time, you're experiencing it all the time. It's just not obvious yet. But when it becomes clear, it's kind of like, I don't believe, is this what the spiritual teachers were talking about? Is this what the Vedantic and the Buddhist traditions were talking about? I knew what this was, it was there all along, but I was just ignoring it. So we need to understand that the thinking mind can't possibly grasp this. What we're looking for is clarity between what is a thought, what is an assumption, and what is actually there. Making that clear is seemingly how you access this. And when you access this, you're not the subject that's observing the object. That is a thought paradigm that collapses, and there isn't a split between subject and object anymore. This is when it gets really, it stops making sense altogether. It has to become experientially clear. And there's no way that you can really talk about this without it sounding weird and vague. But if you can find the right technique, so we're going to ask some questions about our experience, and for the sake of this, we're just going to stick to the visual experience, the visual field, the visual sense. And when we ask the questions, we're not answering them with dialogue, we're not answering them with an assumption in the mind, because these assumptions are automatic. So just like the thinking mind kicked in after a short period of stillness or mind emptiness before the initial awakening, and then after as well, thinking mind kicked in to distract you. But there was some lag to it. There were gaps here all the time, but you didn't really notice. This is much faster. So this is something that is so fast that it just appears to be the way it is until you see through it. And when you see through it, you're not there anymore. That's the difficult part. It's impossible to describe. So I'm trying to think of any other prerequisites to go through. So we've built up these thought mechanisms. So you've got your mental, I don't know if I said this already, I'll just say it again if I have. You've got your mental narrative, the talking in the mind. Okay, as soon as we hear ourselves talking in the mind, in whatever form it may be, mental images, language, whatever, memories, anything that's not just what's in front of us, just what's here in the visual field, we can disregard that completely. We're going to tune into a more subtle, more elusive layer of thought that lies underneath the thinking mind. And usually it's going to take some effort and some practice and some time. But if you can do that, if you can sit and make your this visual sense, this visual experience as clear and as obvious as possible, and it's not like we're filtering it out. We're not filtering out the thoughts. The thoughts aren't. We're having clarity. We're seeing right through them. We're seeing them for what they are, And when they're exposed for what they are, what's actually here becomes obvious. So we've got this bowl, right, on a cushion. A bowl on a cushion. So we're going to initially use this as our object of meditation. So, have you ever thought to yourself before, what is going on here in general? What is life all about? Why am I here? What is all this? What's going on? This is weird. And that question that just can't be answered, like, what is this life? What's going on? That dread, it might appear as, existential dread, uncertainty, not clear what's going on, all these questions that can't be answered, and we avoid it, we distract ourselves from it. That's where we're going to go here. We're going to go directly into that, because that's what I'm talking about. This is a question that can't be answered with the mind, but it can become clear in your experience. And that's the whole point here. So tune into that existential curiosity of, what is all this about? What are these senses? What is this body? What is life? But these are questions that aren't going to be answered by the mind, because it's not possible, like I said. The answer is in our experience. And the answer is right there in front of us, all the time. Kind of taking the piss out of us, because we keep distracting ourselves from the reality of things. So if we tune into that, and we ask the question, when we ask the question, we're not referencing the mind for the answer. We're not answering it from the mind. Assumptions will just be there, but it's going to take some practice to look through those assumptions. Those assumptions are deep layers of thought that have been practiced over a lifetime. So they're probably not going to go away straight away, but it's possible that they might. It's possible that there might be a shift. So I'm using this bowl on a cushion. You can use whatever you want, because it doesn't actually matter what the object is, because that's not the point. So let's begin. I've talked enough shite, so let's begin. So this here, let's just be quiet for a minute. Find an object, anything, doesn't matter what it is. Just look at it. What we're trying to figure out is, what is that? What is that we're looking at? So in my case, I'm looking at a bowl. So ask yourself, what is that? And then see how long it takes for your mind to either start talking about it, or there's an assumption there, there's an automatic, I know what that is. That automatic, I know that's an object. I know that that's an object over there in front of me. All of that is a fabrication of the mind. That's not actually what's happening. That's not actually what's there. Okay, so see how long that takes. If it's instant chatter in the mind, and you're thinking, what are you talking about? You must be off your nut. Then probably not going to happen this time. Maybe with some practice. But if you can just look at the object and consider that. So in this case, I've got a bowl. That is not a bowl. So what I'm looking at there is not what I think it is. And this is one that we can probably use logic with. So a bowl is a label, is a designation, is an assumption, is what we call that thing. It's a bowl, that's an object. a bowl that has inherent existence, that's over there sitting on the table. Okay, that's all of the mind. What is that? And just look at it. And don't look to thought for the answer. Just ask yourself, what is that? And then have the visual experience answer that question for you, but not in the way the mind would answer it. The answer to the question is always already there. It's right there. So if we're honest with ourselves, if we're honest about it, we will have to say that I don't know what that is. I call it a bowl, but I really don't know what that is. And you might run through your mind, just try and find labels for it. It's an object, it's this, it's that. It's none of that. Just accept it. I don't know what that is. What that is an absolute mystery. But it seems to know itself. It's just there. It's there. Whatever it is. The only thing that we can say about it is that at the minute, it's there. Whatever it is. So we're seeing through the labels, we're seeing through the designations, and we're looking at just the visual experience, just the visual sense. And now we can ask, if we're honest with ourselves, only referencing the direct experience, let's say this time in the visual field, does that seeming object there, is that separate from anything else? So we know it's not a bowl, we don't know what it is, but we know it's an object. But now we're asking, is it an object? Is it actually separate from anything else? If the mind comes up to make an assumption that I know what this is, disregard that. Only use the visual experience right now. If we're honest with ourselves, easier to do when we're stationary. If we're honest with ourselves, we have to say that there are, let's use some more labels, there are colours, there are shapes, there's an appearance that seems different from the appearances around it, but appears as part of and amidst the background of everything else. And then we can start to look around and think, what evidence do I have, if I don't reference thought, that that object is separate from anything else in my experience? The tricky part here is not referencing those assumptions that just seem to be true, that are tricky thoughts that are just hiding in the background, seemingly. What I'm experiencing now is one visual sense, not a multitude of visual senses. So now we've said we don't know what an object is, what that object is. I don't know what any of this visual experience is. So can I really call them objects? Can I really assume that these are separate things in this seemingly single field of visual experience that I call my own? That is seemingly indeterminate where it starts and where it ends. Even if I move around the object, never appears on its own, always appears with everything else. Now this might sound ridiculous, but with practice and concentration, and if you're honest with yourself, and you just stay out of the thinking mind, it starts to become obvious that there aren't actually objects here. An object is a thought. An object is a thought. The only thing we can be sure of is that there is, this is where it becomes so hard to talk about, that there is something, and it is. There is a, what we call vision, visual experience, what we call experience. Whatever this is, that seems to be happening right now. Now we're investigating, what is that? What is this? So we've looked at the objects, we've kind of deconstructed them a little bit. Now this is the one that launched me into the realization of non-duality. So you can ask yourself, where is that bowl that we've discovered that I don't know what that is? That thing over there that's part of everything. What is that? Where is it? Where is that? If we don't reference thought, where is that if we don't think about it? So the mind might say, it's over there, it's in front of me, I'm over here, that's over there, it's on a table, blah, 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 blah. That's not what we're looking for. We're just looking into the visual experience to tell us what it is, because it's right there. It seems to be right there. Where is that bowl? Where is it? If we don't reference thought. If you say it's over there, then it's over there in relation to the seeming me that's over here. Where am I? Where are you? Do you know where you are? So that's only over there because I'm over here. Where am I? If I don't know where I am, where is that? Only the image, the visual, not thought. Where is that? If we're honest with ourselves, we have to say that, well, I don't know where that is. It isn't anywhere, really. But it seems to be here, wherever here is. And if we look into this, I can't talk about this, but here and there stop making sense when we let the visual experience overtake the mind completely. Here and there aren't relevant anymore. So this is when the subject in here that's looking at that world of objects out there, these thought paradigms completely collapse and they become completely irrelevant. But what remains after that is what's always been here, is the pure visual experience, except now the experiencer is starting to be exposed as a collection of seemingly real thoughts, deep thoughts that make things seem a certain way. But it's not actually like that. And it's so tricky, it's so fast, it's so well practiced, it comes up instantly, automatically, and it seems so real. But as soon as we see that it's not real, it's laughably obvious that we've been making these assumptions that are completely not based in reality, that make us seemingly see things a certain way. So we don't know what that is, we don't know where it is. So we're turning this onto the entire visual sense. What is this seeing? What is the seen? What are these images? Am I aware of that over here? Or am I aware of that over there? Where is over here? Where is over there? Where is awareness? And awareness is, again, just another thought. When we're not thinking, when we're just in the visual experience, which is undeniably something, let's say, that seems to be here, is right here, wherever here is, which we don't know where it is, but it is. It's undeniable. So we don't know where that is. It's unlocatable. And the visual experience starts to lose its dimensions. The dimensions which were actually assumptions made by the mind. So when I'm looking, when this visual field is being experienced, let's say, what evidence is there if I don't use the mind to answer the question or make an assumption that there's something over there that I'm looking at and I'm over here? What is that process? What's actually here? What is actually appearing? And then we can kind of see that these constructs start to lose their solidity. So distance loses its meaning. Objects lose their inherent existence. The subject and the object become the same thing. We see that things aren't really things. And they're not really anywhere, but they are seemingly somewhere. And this is the paradox. This is when it stops making any sense to the mind whatsoever, and this is as far as I can go, pretty much. This is as far as explaining can take us. After this, it's just experience, direct experience, and eventually you just forget about the experiencer. You forget about the object. You forget about the labels. You forget about distance. You forget everything. It's like you forget it all. It just gets almost pushed into the background, and just what is here now emerges into the foreground, and that's all there is. And to describe non-duality with language is impossible, because language is a kind of dualistic tool. Thought is a dualistic tool. The mind takes you as far as it can, and then you let it go. And then afterwards, you can think. After realizing this, but before realizing this, I could think about it, and I knew there was something there. I knew there was something that I just couldn't quite get to it with thought, and I couldn't quite get to it with experience, until it just switched, and it became obvious, and that afterwards I could kind of think about it. But the mind can't experience it in a sense, if that makes any sense. The mind can't rationalise it. You just accept that it's so far beyond the realm of the thinking mind that it doesn't need an explanation whatsoever. So it can come with some strange effects initially, especially when you have some kind of non-dual experiences during meditation. So it can come with a kind of, it can come with distortions in the way you see things. So things can appear further away or closer, or things can kind of appear together sometimes and apart sometimes. Things that were obviously three-dimensional before kind of become almost, you could say, two-dimensional at times. There can be a kind of extra clear experience of three-dimensional reality. There can be an experience of zero-dimensional reality, where there are no dimensions at all, which is entirely impossible to talk about. It can be perceived that what is being seen is coming through the eyes, through the face, out the back of the head into infinity. It can come with existential terror, because you think you're disappearing. It can come with a sense of suffocating, claustrophobia, or it can come with a sense of peace and, let's say, bliss, satisfaction, or love, or whatever you want to call it. Any of these is a good sign. If the mind is trying to figure it out, if there's frustration there, then that suggests that the mind is putting up a fight, is resisting it. And it's probably a good idea to find a method of calming the mind down. But I hope that helps a little bit. I don't know if I mentioned, but I made this video because someone asked me about it. So I hope that's a decent explanation. That'll do for now. Good luck. Yeah, I also forgot to mention that we're looking for something mysterious, something infinitely mysterious that can't be defined, can't be located, can't be explained by the mind, can't be understood, but knows itself just where it is. So we're not trying to understand something. We're not trying to know something that we didn't know. We're experiencing ourself, in a sense, as all the phenomena that appears in this visual sense that immediately or infinitely knows itself, is aware of itself without having to be anywhere, without having to have any inherent existence, without having to exist or not exist, without having to depend on labels, without having to be figured out to be understood. And when we go into this mysterious, like indeterminate experiencerless experience, let's say, we get the sense that, or we can see that we are, if there was anyone looking, they'd be looking directly into infinity. Looking directly into the timeless and the formless, existing and not existing face of God, in a sense. Experiencing something that's absolutely impossible and fascinating. Experiencing something that's already complete, hence it doesn't need to be figured out. All of these qualities, if we get the sense of this is impossible, this can't be figured out, or my mind doesn't get this, I need to figure this out, that's good. Just keep going in that direction. It doesn't need to be figured out, it doesn't need to be understood. It knows itself already and is not separate from you. So you experience yourself as that visual field, as the objects that appear in it, as everything. But there's no self in there, there's no me in there. It's too real to be called a me. It's too indeterminate. It's too mysterious to be called a me or a self. It just is what it is, without being anything. So if you get that sense and you can feel it, just move into that, and keep going.